TomoNews presents Crazy Turbulence. Air India flight hits rough turbulence. Passengers from an Air India flight last week were treated to some first-class turbulence thanks to Mother Nature. An Air India flight from Amritsar to New Delhi last week experienced turbulence that left 3 passengers injured and caused a window panel to come loose. According to The Hindu, Air India Flight 462 was carrying over 240 passengers on April 19th for the 35-minute flight. Airline officials said the plane took off at 2:50 p.m. and hit rough turbulence soon after at around 15,000 feet due to bad weather. The turbulence lasted for around 10 to 12 minutes. 3 passengers sustained minor injuries. A window panel inside the aircraft also came loose during the turbulence. The injured passengers were treated at the Delhi airport and were still able to make it onto their connecting flights. India's aviation regulator, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, and the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board are now investigating the incident.
Prayers and crying aboard US-bound flight as turbulence terrifies passengers. A flight from Korea to the US was diverted to Tokyo after violent turbulence injured 5 people so badly they needed medical attention. Food everywhere, plates, glassware, and the contents of a flipped beverage cart left the cabin looking like a $2 Thai brothel on a Sunday morning. For the 240 passengers and 15 crew aboard American Airlines Flight 280, this was the most terrifying flight of their lives. Screams, sobbing, and whispered prayers filled the cabin as the hand of God shook the plane like a heroin junkie shakes her baby.
I love my family. I love my family very much. Everybody, please.
The turbulence rocked the plane for nearly a full hour. One passenger reported seeing a flight attendant become airborne and smash into an exit sign above the seats.
Hit your head. Show me the bowl that hit your head. It broke.
The Boeing 777-200 took off from Seoul just after 6 p.m. on the 16th and was due to arrive at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport around 3 a.m. The pilot was forced to abort the original plan and land instead at Japan's Narita airport. None of the injuries were life-threatening, and the passengers were transferred to another flight on Wednesday to complete their journey.
20 injured on South African Airways jet hit by severe turbulence. Passengers on a South African Airways jet had a traumatizing flight after the aircraft was hit by severe turbulence on Wednesday. Flight SA-286 was carrying 165 passengers from Johannesburg, South Africa to Hong Kong. The airliner hit turbulence while crossing Malaysian airspace as most passengers were sleeping. Some were thrown out of their seats, hitting the ceiling and overhead lockers. The pilot decided not to land in other cities and instead head straight to Hong Kong. He requested Hong Kong to provide assistance upon landing. The plane landed safely at Hong Kong International Airport after noon. 20 passengers were injured, 2 of them seriously. 2 people are receiving medical treatment in Hong Kong but are said to be in stable condition.
Airborne passenger cracks Miami-bound flight ceiling. There's turbulence, and then there's a kind of turbulence that quite literally sends passengers airborne, the latter of which being the variety experienced by those unfortunate enough to be aboard a recent American Airlines flight that saw 5 injured. Despite the fact that the seatbelt sign was on, passengers and even the pilots aboard Flight 982 had no idea what was in store for them as they made their way from Grenada to Miami Thursday morning. They were initially greeted by some slight rumbling, apparently without incident. When the turbulence came back to rear its ugly head, though, it struck one sleeping non-seatbelt wearing passenger with a vengeance. A sudden turbulence-induced plunge reportedly sent an unidentified man flying skyward so fast he smacked into the ceiling and broke one of the Airbus A319's top panels. Ouch! Luckily though, the man's cranium didn't properly puncture the aircraft, causing something like this to happen. Phew! Close call. The plane eventually made a successful landing despite the bumpy ride, which apparently came courtesy of Hurricane Joaquin.
American Airlines flight lands in Narita after severe turbulence leaves 14 injured. An American Airlines flight from Korea to the US was forced into an emergency landing in Japan after several crew and passengers were injured after hitting turbulence. American Airlines Flight 280 departed from Seoul at 6:14 on Tuesday. with 240 passengers and 15 crew on board. When it passed through some turbulence caused by a nearby winter storm. Several passengers were injured by the turbulence, forcing the Dallas-bound plane to turn around and make an emergency landing at Narita Airport in Japan, where 14 passengers and crew were treated for injuries. 4 passengers and 1 crew member were later taken to hospital for further treatment. The plane is set to continue its journey to Dallas-Fort Worth on Tuesday.
Extreme turbulence injures 5 on AirAsia X flight. On May 4th, AirAsia X flight 337 traveling from Taipei to Kuala Lumpur encountered severe turbulence. 5 people among the 291 passengers and 11 crew were injured as bodies were launched from their seats, dining carts were upended, and food and utensils strewn about the cabin. Smartphone video of the moments immediately after the terrifying mid-flight experience has since gone viral. Malaysian media reported the flight landed safely at Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 4:30 p.m. local time. The injured passengers received treatment at the airport, and several were later taken to hospital. AirAsia X management has yet to provide detailed information about the severity of the passengers' injuries.
You okay? Am I questioning you? No. Should we?
Let's. Passengers thrown around like rag dolls after Aeroflot flight hit severe turbulence. At least 27 people, including babies, were hurt after an Aeroflot flight hit severe turbulence on Monday morning. Aeroflot flight SU-270 was traveling from Moscow to Bangkok and was about 40 minutes from its destination when it hit clear air turbulence. This type of turbulence occurs during clear cloudless skies and cannot be detected by radar. Under these conditions, airplanes experience severe turbulence when they move through the space between fast and slow jet streams. 3 passengers on the Aeroflot flight reportedly required surgeries to treat leg fractures and broken ribs. Some passengers said they saw babies with bruises after the incident. The company has said they will cover the medical costs of those who were injured.
6 passengers and 2 crew members were injured on Tuesday when a Hong Kong-bound Cathay Pacific plane from San Francisco encountered severe clear air turbulence over Japan. Commercial aircraft usually fly between the troposphere and stratosphere. Clear air turbulence is usually generated in the high troposphere. Clear air turbulence is created when a plane moves along the edges of a jet stream, a fast-flowing narrow band of strong wind, at high altitudes. Aircraft are also susceptible to clear air turbulence when passing mountainous terrain, which disturbs the horizontal flow of air. Scientists say global warming can lead to more frequent clear air turbulence.
Horrific turbulence on United flight sends 12 to the hospital. Passengers and crew members on board a transatlantic flight were all traumatized after their plane was thrown about by massive forces mid-air. United Airlines Flight 880 was flying from Houston to London with 220 people on board when they encountered a mid-air scare. The plane hit turbulence just over the Atlantic, which caused it to shake and drop violently. Passengers that had been sleeping moments earlier were now flying out of their seats. Others got cuts and bruises from being banged around the cabin. Despite being just 300 miles from London, the plane diverted to Ireland. 12 had to be brought to the hospital once the plane landed around 6 a.m. Flights in the past have had similarly horrific experiences in the sky, caused by clear air turbulence, and the same may be true for the United flight. Clear air turbulence typically occurs in the cloudless skies of the upper atmosphere. It's mostly generated when a plane moves across fast-flowing air currents called jet streams. Here, high-speed winds and slow-moving air traveling in different directions can cause sudden and violent movements to a passing aircraft. Clear air turbulence is difficult to detect, and likewise hard to avoid. So unless commercial aircraft start strapping on LiDAR technology, passengers will just have to buckle up and hang on. Severe turbulence throws passengers out of their seats on Qatar flight. Some 300 people flying from Washington to Doha on state-owned Qatar Airways this Sunday had a pretty bumpy ride. It all started when a passenger began suffering what was initially believed to be a heart attack. This prompted the captain to divert mid-flight to a Portuguese military base on Azores for an emergency landing. The thing is, during this diversion, the plane reportedly hit severe turbulence upon descent. How bad was it? The plane apparently dropped so steeply, it threw people out of their seats. According to reports, a 3-year-old boy was sent flying across the aisle onto another passenger's lap. Several passengers hit the ceiling, and some were left bleeding. One passenger broke a leg. 3 received treatment at a local hospital. Oh, and the heart attack that led to the diversion ended up not being a heart attack after all.